I'm sure almost every school has that one bootleg bathroom where everything's broken, or the stall doors are missing, or the urinals are way too close together. At our school, it was the bathroom in the building by the gym, and like half the time I went in there, this one urinal was overflowing. I think they actually closed the bathroom down almost our entire senior year. Anyway, this took place during our junior year. It was after a particularly grueling basketball practice, and I was the last one in the locker room. Needing to relieve myself before heading home, I ventured into that notorious bathroom. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting an eerie, strobing effect across the stained tiles. The air was thick with a musty smell of old water and something else I couldn't quite place, something almost organic. As usual, the urinal in question was gurgling softly, a slow trickle of water spilling over the edge like it was whispering secrets. I chose the one furthest from it, keeping my distance out of some unspoken superstition. That's when things started to feel off. The moment I began, the lights dimmed further, and the gurgling from the haunted urinal grew louder and more agitated. I laughed it off internally, thinking about how my friends would react if they knew I was spooked by a bathroom. But then, the sound morphed. It wasn't just water, it sounded like a low, guttural whisper. I tried to finish quickly, but my body froze as the whisper formed words. Look behind. Heart pounding, I couldn't help but turn my head slightly, expecting to see a prankster or maybe just a rat scurrying by. Instead, from the corner of my eye, I saw the water in the overflowing urinal begin to darken, turning a murky, almost black color, bubbling as if boiling. Then, something started to rise from the urinal. It was amorphous, dripping with that dark liquid, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape but with limbs too long and a head that twisted in unnatural ways. The whisper now was clear, echoing around the bathroom. You shouldn't have looked. Panic surged through me. I zipped up, not caring if I was fully done, and bolted towards the door. But the door, which had always been a bit sticky, wouldn't budge. Behind me, the entity made a wet, sloshing sound as it seemed to detach itself fully from the urinal, moving closer with each of my frantic pulls at the door. The room grew colder, my breath visible in the air, and the smell became overpowering, like decay. Just as I felt a cold, wet touch on my shoulder, the door finally gave way, and I stumbled out, falling onto the gym floor. Scrambling to my feet, I didn't dare look back until I was well away from the building. When I finally did, there was nothing unusual. The door was closed, the lights from the bathroom casting a normal, if dim, glow through the frosted glass. After that experience, I never used that specific bathroom again, and by senior year when they closed it down, I felt a mix of relief and a chilling curiosity about what might have happened. What might have happened if that door hadn't opened. Rumors circulated about why it was shut, some saying it was plumbing, others hinting at something darker. But I knew, or at least I thought I did, and every now and then, when I pass by an old, rundown bathroom, I hear that whisper in my mind, reminding me that some things are better left unseen. Back in our sophomore year of college, my friends and I had been partying one night and got pretty drunk. I have no idea how the topic came up, but we somehow got curious about what was in the men's restroom, as we were all women and none of us had been in one before. At least, none of us were willing to admit it. The alcohol made us bold, and we decided on a whim to sneak into the men's bathroom of the old, rarely used gym on campus. It was rumored to be haunted, but at the time, that just added to the thrill. The bathroom was as you'd expect, dim, with a flickering light that seemed like it could give out any second, and an eerie silence that was only broken by our nervous giggles. The tiles were cracked, and there was a musty smell that hung in the air. We tiptoed in, our laughter fading as the atmosphere began to weigh on us. There, against the far wall, stood an old-fashioned urinal, the kind that reaches down to the floor, made of stained porcelain that had seen better days. It was larger than I had imagined, almost ominous in its presence. We approached it, half joking about how it looked like it could swallow someone whole. As we stood there, a cold draft swept through the room, which was odd because all the windows were sealed shut. Then, the urinal began to gurgle. We laughed at first, thinking it was just the old plumbing, but the gurgling turned into a low, guttural growl, and the water inside began to swirl like a miniature whirlpool. Suddenly, from the depths of the urinal, a pale, elongated hand reached out, grasping at the air. Its fingers were unnaturally long, with nails that looked more like claws. We screamed, our drunkenness instantly replaced by sheer terror. We turned to run, but the door we had easily pushed open now wouldn't budge, as if someone was holding it from the other side. The hand was followed by an arm, then another hand, both emerging from the urinal, pulling up a figure that was human-like but distorted, with skin that clung to its bones like wet paper. Its eyes were hollow, and when it opened its mouth, instead of words, there came a sound like water draining mixed with a chilling whisper that seemed to echo directly in our minds. It said, "You shouldn't have come here." We pounded on the door, our earlier curiosity replaced by a primal need to escape. Just as the figure began to fully emerge, dripping with a dark viscous fluid, the door finally gave way and we tumbled out, scrambling to our feet and running without looking back. We never spoke of that night again, at least not in detail. We also avoided that part of the campus, and whenever the topic of men's restrooms came up, we changed the subject. But I'll never forget the lessons learned. Some curiosities are better left unsatiated, and some places, like that old urinal in the forgotten gym bathroom, are left abandoned for a reason. Back in middle school, there was this one urinal that was different from the others. For starters, the porcelain was some weird light orange color, and it had what looked like old-fashioned pipes connecting it to the wall. It was tucked away in the corner of the boys' bathroom on the second floor, a place rarely visited due to its eerie vibe and the flickering light overhead that never seemed to get fixed. The boys whispered about it during lunch breaks. They said if you used that urinal, sometimes you could hear whispers, like faint echoes of conversations long past. But the real kicker was Tommy's story. Tommy, the class daredevil, decided one day to prove how brave he was by using it during detention when no one else was around. According to Tommy, he was doing his business when the temperature in the bathroom dropped suddenly. His breath became visible in the air, and the usual school sounds faded into an oppressive silence. Then, the urinal flushed on its own, but instead of water, a thick, dark red liquid began to swirl down, filling the basin. Tommy swore it looked just like blood. Panicked, he had tried to back away, but something held him there, an invisible force. That's when he heard it, a voice, raspy and old, whispering directly into his ear, "You shouldn't have come here." The pipes rattled violently, and from them, a chorus of anguished voices burst forth, screaming in pain or anger, Tommy couldn't tell. He finally broke free, running out without even zipping up, his face pale as a sheet. After that, Tommy was never quite the same. He avoided that bathroom like the plague. Whenever someone brought up the urinal, he'd go quiet, his eyes darting around as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. The story might have been dismissed as another school legend, except for what happened a year later. During a renovation, workers found something behind the wall where the urinal was mounted. Hidden inside was an old, rusted box, sealed with what looked like wax, but turned out to be something more organic. Inside the box were photographs, very old, from the early 1900s. They were of children, all looking solemn and scared. Scribbled on the back of one was a date and a note, the lost ones, 1912. The school sealed off the bathroom after that discovery, but the stories didn't stop. Students claimed that on quiet days, if you listened closely outside the sealed door, you could still hear the faint sound of water running. Or perhaps, something else was flowing. And sometimes, just sometimes, there was a whisper, a chilling reminder that some things are better left undisturbed. Though the urinal was removed, the tale of its curse lived on, a chilling chapter in the school's history. It warned all those who heard it to respect the unseen forces that linger in forgotten places. In 5th grade, our class took a field trip to the Science Museum. One of the exhibits was about things like garbage collection and plumbing, and this one section had a transparent toilet and pipes where you could see the water flowing. My friends and I immediately cracked up when we saw this, since we were a bunch of young boys. But our attention soon turned to the urinal right next to it. The urinal was different. It wasn't transparent like the toilet, but it had this odd, almost antique look to it, with ornate carvings around its edges that looked out of place in the modern setting of the museum. The plaque beside it read, "The Everlasting Urinal, a 19th century marvel," claiming it was designed to never need flushing due to some forgotten technology. Curiosity got the better of us, and Timmy, the bravest, or perhaps the most foolish among us, decided to use it. As he stepped up, we noticed the carving seemed to shift, but we shrugged it off as a trick of the light. Timmy laughed, saying something about feeling like royalty, but his laughter slowly turned into a nervous chuckle. Then, it happened. The moment he started, the urinal began to make a low, humming sound, which escalated into what sounded like whispers. At first we thought it was just part of the exhibit, some sort of sound effect, until Timmy tried to step back, but couldn't. He was stuck, his face paling as he struggled. Then the whispers grew louder, now clearly coming from the urinal, speaking in a language none of us understood, but all of us heard. The carvings that we had dismissed earlier now twisted into faces, grotesque and anguished, as if they were souls trapped within the porcelain. Panicking, Timmy screamed for help. Our teacher, Mrs. Henderson, rushed over, but even she couldn't pull him away. The museum staff were called, and they looked as baffled and horrified as we felt. They tried turning off the main water supply, thinking it might stop whatever was happening, but the urinal wasn't connected in any traditional sense. As we watched, the urinal started to glow with a dim, eerie light, and the faces in the carvings began to move, their expressions shifting from pain to a sinister glee. Timmy's screams turned into a gurgle as the urinal seemed to absorb him, bit by bit. It was like watching someone being pulled into quicksand. The museum was evacuated and we were all rushed out, but not before I saw something that still haunts my dreams. Timmy, or what was left of him, his face now one among the many in the carvings, his eyes wide with eternal terror. After that day, the museum closed the exhibit, and it was never spoken of again. The media labeled it as an unfortunate accident, something about old plumbing and hallucinogenic gases, but those of us who were there know the truth. We never talked about it, not even amongst ourselves, but every now and then, in the dead of night, I can still hear those whispers. And I wonder about the other places that urinal might have been, and where it might appear next. As I'm sure everybody remembers fondly, the book fair was an amazing excuse to get out of class, and for me and my friends, it meant we could essentially goof off the entire day. At one point, we found this book about urinals, and for some reason, we found the idea of that book kind of hysterical. We flipped through it, laughing at the various designs and historical facts. Then Tommy, always the one to push things a bit further, dared us to try out an ancient urinal ritual he swore he read in the book. The ritual was simple, too silly to take seriously. You had to go to the oldest bathroom in school at midnight, flush the urinal 3 times, and then say your name backwards. We all laughed it off, but as night fell and our curiosity, and perhaps our teenage bravado, got the better of us, we decided to do it. Our school was pretty creepy at night, with shadows stretching long and the usual hum of daytime activity eerily absent. We snuck into the oldest part of the school, where the tiles were cracked and the paint was peeling. The bathroom was at the end of a dimly lit corridor, smelling of mildew and old plumbing. There it was, the urinal, an ancient porcelain relic that looked like it hadn't been updated since the school was built. Tommy, with a flashlight under his chin to set the mood, went first. He flushed it once, twice, thrice, and then with a theatrical whisper, said, "Emat." We all snickered, but there was an underlying tension. Nothing happened, of course. We all took our turns, the atmosphere lightening with each successive flush and name reversal. Then it was finally my turn. I did as the others had, the water swirling oddly as I completed the 3rd flush. "Nihaj," I said, my voice echoing slightly. We waited, half expecting something, half ready to laugh at the absurdity. Silence. Then a gurgle, not from the urinal, but from somewhere deep within the school's plumbing. The sound grew louder, turning into a groan, like metal in old pipes being strained. The urinal began to shake slightly, and water, or what we hoped was water, started to trickle from the edges, but it was dark, almost black. Then the lights flickered, and a cold draft swept through the bathroom, carrying with it a whisper that sounded eerily like my name, but not quite right, like it was being mocked. The urinal's trickle turned into a stream, and the water was definitely not clear anymore. It was thick, viscous, and dark. We backed away, but the door we entered through wouldn't budge. The stream from the urinal became a gush, flooding the floor with that dark, foul-smelling liquid. Then it began to form into something. A figure, rising from the urinal, made of shadows in that vile water, with eyes that glowed a faint, sickly green. It spoke, but not with words. Instead, it projected thoughts into our minds, thoughts of being trapped, of endless falling into darkness, of being forgotten in the depths of the earth. The figure reached out, and where it touched, cold spread, a numbing, terrifying cold. We screamed, pounding on the door, and suddenly it gave way. We tumbled out, running without looking back until we were out of the school, under the starlit sky, panting and terrified. After that night, none of us spoke of the incident. The bathroom was found flooded the next day, attributed to old plumbing issues. But every now and then, when I pass by a urinal, especially an old one, I can't help but feel a chill. And then I remember the night we learned that some things, even as mundane as a urinal, might hold more than just water in their depths. My name is JD, and growing up, I played a few jokes. This one time, I convinced a few of my friends who were girls to sneak into the boys' bathroom and pretend to use the urinals while one of our other friends took a picture. It was all in good fun, or so we thought at the time. Little did we know, that prank would set off a chain of events leading to something far more sinister. Years later, I found myself working late nights at an old office building downtown. The place had its quirks, one of which was the ancient bathroom on the 13th floor, seldom used because of its eerie vibe. The lights flickered, the tiles were cracked, and there was this one urinal at the end, larger than the others, with an ornate, almost gothic design that seemed out of place. It was as if it had been transplanted from another era. One particularly late night, I was alone in the building. The silence was oppressive, and for some reason, I felt drawn to that bathroom. Maybe it was nostalgia, or perhaps curiosity about the odd urinal. As I stood there, the air grew cold, and the flickering lights dimmed even more. That's when I heard it, a whisper, so faint it might have been the wind, but there were no windows in the bathroom. JD, the voice seemed to hiss from the urinal itself. I laughed nervously, thinking my mind was playing tricks. But then, the urinal flushed on its own. Not the modern, automatic kind of flush, but a loud, mechanical clank followed by a gurgling that sounded like a laugh. I stepped back, my heart racing, when suddenly the lights went out completely. In the pitch black, the sound of water, or something like it, began to trickle. Then a cold, wet touch brushed against my hand. I bolted out, not daring to look back. The next day, I tried to dismiss it as my imagination, but curiosity got the better of me. I did some digging into the building's history. Turns out, the 13th floor was once a private club in the 1920s, and there were rumors of a man who was humiliated there during a prank gone wrong, leading to his untimely death. His name was Jonathan Drake, initials JD, just like mine. The more I read, the more the pieces fell into place. The urinal was installed as part of the club's lavish decor, and it was said Jonathan's spirit lingered, seeking revenge for the mockery he endured. Eventually I decided to confront whatever was there. Armed with nothing but my phone for light, I returned to the bathroom. This time, I spoke out loud, apologizing for my past prank, explaining it was all in jest. The atmosphere shifted, the cold receded slightly, and then, in the dim light of my phone, I saw words forming on the mirror, fogging up as if breathed on from the inside. Pranks bind, not just the prankster, but the witness too. The urinal flushed once more, this time softly, almost like a sigh of relief. From that night on, the bathroom felt lighter, the eerie feeling gone. But I never used that urinal again, and I've since treated pranks with a lot more caution. Sometimes, the echoes of our actions reverberate in ways we can't possibly imagine, binding us to the past in the most unexpected places.